Good morning, everyone. Welcome to part two of developing expressive language abilities in our partner language of our dual language programs. This is the application session for dual language teachers in grades 4 through 8. And I'm again very pleased to have Dr. Nancy Cloud, Professor Emeriti from Rhode Island College, present for you this morning. Let's start.
Okay, well, thank you, Ron. And thank you everyone for making time today. I know it's a little bit cloudy. That's how it is here in Rhode Island as well. So we're going to make the best of it and hope for sunshine to come out the minute we're finished. And where we're going to start today is where we always start, reminding you that there were handouts for you on our Padlet in the second column, 3 of them for today that we'll use as we follow along in the breakout sessions. And also to remind you that you can relax because we will send this PowerPoint to you afterwards. So any of the resources that are listed on the slides that you want to connect with in the future, you'll be able to do that as you'll have the PowerPoint. And you'll also have a recording in case there's some part you want to share with colleagues or you just want to listen again because it happened too quickly. So all of that will happen sometime next week. And before we begin, we do ask that if at all possible, you leave your camera on because we really love to see you, but we do understand that it's a Saturday and you might be in more relaxed mode. So if you're not going to be leaving.
Let's wait 1 more minute and then.
Okay, so someone has their mic on. So if you cannot leave your camera on, if you could then show us that you're there in other ways by participating in the chat. And also we will send you twice today to 2 breakouts where you will see the application of Talk, Read, Talk, Write with first a narrative text and then second an expository text. So we want to get very, very concrete today with a lot of good strategies for you and also strong modeling. And if you are not speaking, then we ask that you please leave your microphone off, just so we're not picking up background noise of your phones going off or people talking to you and so forth. So again, I want to acknowledge the full team from the NYU Auburn because I promise you everybody was very intimately involved with this series, and it's because we're doing it in 5 languages. So you're going to see later that you'll have the chance, if you're in a Chinese dual language program, to join Nancy in the breakout room to see how we implement Talk, Read, Talk, Write in Chinese, and the same with Nicole in Haitian Creole, the same with Marina in Russian. Maria and Gloria will be doing it in Spanish, and I'll be doing it in English for any people who are the English partner and you are not speakers of those partner languages. But I also want to acknowledge the people whose names you see on the right, because they've been very involved in the sophisticated technology that was needed to present this series to you. And so Antoine's got his work cut out for him to handle everything for us. But I want you to know that Veronica and Xiomara were also intimately involved in getting things on the Padlet and working with all of the technology with all of us in advance. So big shout out to all of the Auburn staff, and even more than you see on the screen because the CTLEs are handled by others and so forth. But here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start with a brief review of why it's so important that we, especially in dual language programs, are using culturally responsive text. Remember last time we talked about how one of our primary learning objectives in a dual language program is to promote cross-cultural competence so that our learners who graduate from a dual language program are fully able to function effectively in differing cultural environments. And when we use culturally responsive text, we are demonstrating how people function in particular cultural environments. So we'll say more about that as we go along. And we also will be modeling with you with the 2 major types of text. As you know, in the next generation ELA or language standards that you have and are working with in New York State, there are narrative goals for reading and there are expository goals for reading. So reading informational text and reading literature. And we want to point out to you the important differences between the type of language learning opportunities strategies that exist when working with narrative text as opposed to expository text. We want to make that very explicit because you want to take advantage of the type of language you can develop with each type of text. And especially at your grade levels, if kids have been in your dual language program since kindergarten, and in some cases since pre-K, they really need their language to get pushed forward in grades 4 through 8. And so we want to understand what can we be doing with them to help their language become much more complex and sophisticated in the later elementary and middle school grades. We'll also talk about interactive scaffolds because to support speaking and writing opportunities, we need high levels of interaction. So we'll be talking about that. And we'll definitely be exploring strategies and tools that support kids when they are speaking and writing in a second language at the word, sentence, and paragraph level. We always have a group of second language speakers and writers in front of us when we're in a dual language program, some for whom Russian is their second language and some for whom English is their second language. So we'll be talking about that, as well as the role of feedback in promoting language growth. Then we'll discuss why talk is important, and particularly why targeting the talk is important. Just talking alone doesn't necessarily promote language growth. It has to be targeted in specific ways, and we'll be talking about that as we go along. We'll also talk about reading like a writer, how we can cause kids when they're looking at mentor text to read like a writer, to gain strategies as writers that can advance their writing and language development. And then before we go to the first breakout room, I'll briefly revisit the talk, read, talk, write protocol and strategies of Nancy Motley, because we'll be sharing those again with you. And in the first breakout session, we'll be doing so with a biography, a picture book biography, specifically selected for your grade levels to show how we can use sensory scaffolds, which are photographs, illustration, and drawing, as speaking and writing prompts, how we can promote descriptive language and help advance kids' language length and complexity. So that's what we'll be doing in breakout 1. You'll come back to me briefly, where we'll talk a tiny bit about expository text. Then we'll send you again to your language breakout rooms, where we'll talk about expository text. We're going to model with the theme of hurricanes, and you'll see why. And we're going to talk about the graphic, not the sensory scaffolds, but the graphic scaffolds that support expressive language. And we'll focus on graphic organizers and interactive word walls as ways of advancing spoken and written language. We'll discuss directly sentence complexity and verb variety and how we can push both of those forward. And with both of those breakout sessions that you see in red and blue, we are going to be showing you the language supports and the content scaffolds that we need to add to Nancy Motley's strategies, the talk, read, talk, write strategies. So we're really going to integrate everything all together for you. And of course, as we go along, we've selected every text you're going to see because we know it's culturally responsive. And so we need that type of text to promote language and literacy development and also cross-cultural learning. And then in the last few minutes of today, we will share with you what's on the Padlet that we think will be of use to you in the future. So that's where we're headed. And last time, just a little review from last time, that I asked all of you, as we talked about the multilingual literacy screener, where you can evaluate the level of literacy in our partner languages for reading and writing. I asked all of you to please share the assessments that you use in your programs, and you did so in the chat. I collected that information and I added it to this part of the Padlet, the multilingual screener and other assessments in use in your programs. But I want you to know that most of the tools that were shared were in Spanish, and almost all of them had to do with reading assessment, not speaking and writing. So I added some things for speaking and writing, and it's also in that Padlet column. The first were speaking and writing rubrics from a dual language program in Arlington, Virginia, speaking rubrics and writing rubrics in Spanish for grades 1 through 5. And my hope is that you could expand upon those for grades 6 through 8. And then I also added the WIDA rubrics for speaking and writing, which only exist in English, but you could adapt them for your languages. And the way that, just to explain to you, they have the same 5 proficiency levels that you do in New York State, only they call transitioning, developing, and it's entering and emerging, that's the same. Then they call transitioning, developing, then expanding is called the same word, and then commanding is called bridging, and they have a 6th level called reaching, which means no longer ELL, but they show you what each level of proficiency can do when speaking and writing. And my thought was you might be able to adapt this over to your partner language, Haitian, Creole, Russian, Chinese, or Spanish. Okay, so that's there for you. And then just a word about bridging before we move on, and a reminder that I have a whole column for you on the Padlet about translanguaging and bridging in dual language programs. These are 2 key resources that you might want to hone in on if bridging was a new concept to you in dual language programs. A really wonderful video and a great article. And remember that bridging, as it refers to dual language, is the period of instruction at the end of a unit where you make sure that kids can talk about what they learned in both languages. So let's say you taught them about the 3 branches of government in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Well, you want to make sure they can talk about that. Maybe they only learned about it in Haitian Creole, but you're going to make sure they can talk about it also in English. And you do that in an instructional period called bridging, an instructional period called bridging at the end of the unit. And especially when you just teach a unit only in one language, which, as you know, I was recommending to you last time that you alternate the units, teaching one in the partner language and one in English. And then at the end of each of those units, you would bridge to the other language. So you can intensify the learning. And it's also the time when we show how the 2 languages work. So we might show something like how SION, CION, and XION at the end of the word in Spanish all acts with accent marks, and in TION or SION in English. So bridging is a very important instructional period. We don't reteach the unit. We already taught the unit. We just make sure that all the language is alive in both languages so kids can talk about what they learned very effectively. And so now let's move on to today's topic, the most important of which is that we must be using culturally responsive sustaining texts of all genres in a dual language program. We could never get enough of that to happen in a dual language program. And the reason we love it so much is because in those books that are culturally responsive, it's where language and culture come together. It's where rich opportunities exist for language and literacy development, but also for cross-cultural learning. And so these are examples of books. Most on the screen are in English to show you that even when I'm doing English language arts, I can be promoting culturally responsive text and culturally responsive / sustaining text that is helping my English speakers learn about how kids function and families function in these other cultures. So all of the books that you see on the screen, this one for Spanish, representing a Dominican experience, this one for Russian, and also Ukrainian, where borscht also happens. This one for Haitian Creole, and this one for Chinese American experience. These have very rich cultural connections, and they all show valued traditions and experiences that can help our kids speak and write and tell stories that are very similar to the ones that they're seeing in the book. All of these books value bilingualism and biliteracy. They use the actual names of all of the relatives and neighbors and local places. They're all using words and that represent concepts that are important in all of these cultures. And they capture kids' feelings and emotions as bilingual, bicultural individuals. And some of them tell the story of migration and immigration. And so in that regard, it's creating opportunities for the kids who've lived similar experiences to speak about their experiences and get lots of opportunity for language use. And obviously, it's also very useful as take-home texts where the families can enjoy these books together with their kids. And I did want to mention to those of you that are middle school teachers, why did we choose as narratives? Why didn't we choose novels? Why didn't we choose poetry? We chose picture book biographies because picture books are very useful in middle school and in high school. They allow us to use both text and illustration to promote speaking, reading, and writing. They're typically shorter and they fit into shorter instructional timeframes, yet they allow us to focus on grade level language arts learning objectives such as literary analysis, author's style, figurative language, etc., etc. And they are produced by authors and illustrators from diverse cultural backgrounds, which allows our kids to view themselves as future authors and illustrators and see styles of illustration and worldviews represented in these texts that authentically reflect the partner culture. And remember, we're calling the partner language and the partner culture. That's how we're referring to Chinese, Haitian Creole, Russian, and Spanish, our partner languages in dual language programs. So here are some books that exist in both languages. You can see this is in Russian, this is in Chinese, this is in Spanish. And for those of you that read Chinese, I do want to mention that when this book was developed in Chinese, I guess, unfortunately, it was traditional Chinese and you're probably using simplified. So it has kind of that challenge. But we do want to have books in both languages. Some of our families do read traditional Chinese. And so remember that always I would urge you to use single language books, the book in Russian or the book in English and not a dual language book, because it will keep your language focus clear. And it will also help kids who are new to Russian. English won't be on the page. They won't be tempted to look at the English. It's not even there. So it makes it clear, right now I'm after Russian kids, I'm not after English. So that's why I like the single language books. And always seek out books that were originally written in the partner language if possible. But if not, make sure you're using an adaptation or translation. Remember, adaptation means it's adapted to the other language, but it's written in a very linguistically accurate way. It's not a word for word or sentence by sentence translation. So it makes it much more authentic. But we want the book that has been adapted or translated to reflect our learners' lives and worlds. And all of these books, even though some are written in English, these 3 books are written in English, but it's reflecting the partner culture world. And that's what we want, whether teaching in English or teaching in Russian, Haitian Creole, or Chinese, because they get plenty of opportunities to see books that represent the American experience. We don't have to even go after that, but we do have to amplify the voice of the partner culture. It's important in a dual language program. So the other thing I want to urge you to do is, rather than read this book in English, then read it again in Chinese, this book in English language arts and this book in Chinese language arts, that's not what I want to do. I want to have 2 related books on the same theme, not the same exact book. So when we read in Chinese, we're reading about Jeremy Lin because my kids love basketball, but also when we read about Jeremy Lin in English, we're still learning about him, but with a different book. If we repeat the same book, it's very boring, and kids will learn to just wait because they know you're going to read the book again in their preferred language. So the only time I need these two books, once in Haitian and once in English, is when I'm bridging. So I do like to have the two books in both languages, because when I get ready to bridge, I can take a page from this book and show a page from the other language and how it's different, how English works differently than Haitian Creole. And you can see it right here with the joiner phrase, right? Like Rita, Akjako, and Rita and the parrot. Okay, so there are things that we can point out to kids. So we want the books to be available in both languages, and we can use them during bridging, but we don't want to distract kids when we're doing language arts in a particular language. We'd like to be all in that language if at all possible. Okay, and when we remember last time we did see with Primer Dia en las Uvas, or first day in grapes, we saw a teacher do the así se dice strategy, where she showed a page that they had read in Spanish, and then she showed what the page read like in English, and the kids saw the differences between the English and the Spanish. And we can point out other differences as well, such as pronunciation differences or word morphology comparisons. If I am using a dual language format book, then I want to notice the status it ascribes to both languages and cultures. And I want to notice where is the partner language on the page and where is English. Is English always first? So if it's a top-bottom text arrangement, English is at the top and Russian is at the bottom. If it's a left-right orientation, is Chinese on the left and English on the right? I want to notice that. And which culture is reflected? I already pointed that out, but this is very important for us to notice. What about the art? What about the illustrations? Because the visual literacy is becoming more and more and more important, and we want kids to notice the art and illustrations. It is part of how our partner culture represents itself in artistic expression. And we also want to make sure the bilingual bicultural experience is reflected in the book. And so here is a book in Spanish English. It's a rare dual language book where it really alternates very fairly between English and Spanish. So if the arrangement of the text is top bottom, then English is on the top and Spanish is on the bottom. But if it's a left right page orientation, then Spanish is on the left and comes first, and English is on the right. But most dual language books place English first because they want to sell a lot of books. It's just a commercial purpose. And they want a lot of teachers to say, oh, I can use that book. And so they put the English first. But we need to talk about that with kids in our grade levels and ask them about social justice and the fairness of English always coming first. We want them to think about that. Is it fair? Is it just? And why does English always come first? So now let's talk about our narrative and expository text, because you know you're going to see them in the breakout rooms. And let's think deeply about the language learning opportunities that they offer. And so the first thing to notice is that narrative text, and we hope we're choosing narratives that celebrate bilingualism, biliteracy, and biculturalism. Those narrative texts that we're choosing model for the kids literary language, okay? They model literary language, and they have time as their deep structure. They're telling a story, and it has a beginning, middle, and end, even if it's told out of sequence. Many, many time markers are used. You're going to see this in your breakout room books, that it says then such and such and such, after a short time such and such, later that year such and such. Time markers are very frequent. Events are retold for the purpose of informing or entertaining. Today, we're going to see narratives that are actually biographies. So they're informing us about these people's lives and why. Why is there a biography of Pura Belpre? And the rest of our narratives are to entertain, really for enjoyment, for pleasure. And we want kids to understand these dual purposes. Many have a conflict that gets resolved, and dialogue is often a very important point of the writing, and important conversations transpire among the characters. But a very essential thing of literary language is rich phrasing that is used to describe characters, settings, and events. And we're going to show you how you can be developing descriptive language in your kids. Rich descriptive language that uses not just simple adjectives, but rich adjectival phrases, adverbs, adverbial phrases, prepositional phrases that tell when, where, and how things happen. And also, these texts use very precise and specific verbs that create rich mental images of things that are happening or people involved. So we want the kids to notice that, and we want them to use this type of text as mentor text, and we'll be showing you how to do that when we get in the breakout rooms. By comparison, expository text does not model literary language. It models academic language. And we know this, but sometimes we forget what we should really be working on with each of these types of texts. Expository text describes how things are in the natural and social world. So if I'm doing hurricanes, I'm talking about the natural world. If I'm doing forms of government, I'm doing our social world, and I'm showing how things are. And these texts include some sort of an opening where I introduce my topic, any of the ways that you see on the screen. They group ideas logically and they sequence ideas logically. And at the end, they provide a general statement that provides closure to the topic and often summarizes everything that was learned. Often they use present tense verbs because they're presenting facts that's always true. It's always true. This thing is always true about the three branches of government. So I'm going to use present tense, unless I'm talking about how the branches were formed, in which case then I'm talking in past tense or past perfect tense. And they use very precise academic and specialized vocabulary that we want kids to be using. And it's not just nouns, it's not just, I'm talking about the legislative branch, but the verbs are very specific, such as passing laws, allocating funding, and so forth. And the adjectives are very precise. And when we read about these topics, the sentences are very long and complex, much longer and much more complex than when we speak about the same topic. So both of these texts can use lengthy sentences, of course, but I'm just pointing out here the difference between spoken and written language in expository text, because when kids are speaking about expository topics, they're going to be tempted to speak in shorter sentences, and you want to push hard to get them to speak in lengthy sentences, the type they saw in the book. And certainly when they're writing, we want to see that type of language. So here's a summary slide for you, and I'll go first with expository. Expository presents details, facts, descriptions, explanations, comparisons. The content beyond the text are photographs, graphics, quotes, and authors' opinions. The genre is expository. It might be argumentative or persuasive. It could be procedural, how to use a microscope. And it could be literary nonfiction. Like if any of you know the book, Come On Rain, it talks about the humid conditions ahead of a thunderstorm in a narrative format. But kids are definitely learning about the air pressure and the conditions of the atmosphere prior to a thunderstorm by reading that book. So it's literary, but it really is giving some nonfiction information. And the text structures that are common are the type that you see here on the screen without me reading it to you. And the elements that we see in expository text are sections, titles, headings, subheadings, italics, boldface type, captions, etc. Whereas in narrative text, the details are about the character's experience, the character's words, actions, interactions with others, the character's thoughts and feelings. Maybe if it's describing the setting, then we're seeing very explicitly the time and place that things transpire, the actual events that take place and details about those events. And the genre can be any of the ones that you see on the screen, including, remember that biographies, picture book biographies or biographies are really expository texts because they're providing factual information, but they're done with a narrative format. So it's really a crossover type of genre. The text structure, it can be of these types, and there's always a beginning, middle, and end, even when it's told out of sequence. And these are the story elements we love and teach every day to kids at our grade levels. And certainly we can do that. It's one of our language arts objectives when we're teaching narrative text. So you may want to return to these slides to just remind yourself, let me stay on track. Let me do what I should be doing when I'm working with each of these types of texts. And let me think about the type of speaking and writing I can promote with each of these types of texts. Now, last time in session 1 handouts, we gave you this checklist, and we talked to you about content scaffolding being of 3 types. We give kids sensory supports like illustrations, drawings, and diagrams, pictures and photographs, models and figures to support their learning of content. We give them graphic supports, charts and graphic organizers and tables and timelines, and we give them interactive supports. So today, when we're in the narrative breakout room, we will be modeling for you sensory supports. Then when you get into the expository breakout, we will model graphic organizers, charts, word walls, tables, etc. And now I'm going to show you the interactive supports, because we should always, if we want speaking and writing, and even to support listening and reading, we should be doing high levels of interaction in dual language classrooms. So we're going to talk about some strategies right now, and we will model those for you in the breakout room. Okay, so you should be doing those interactive supports with both types of text. And we will also model in the breakout room all of the language supports at the word, sentence, and discourse level, so that this checklist we hope will be useful to you in thinking about the design of your lessons, to make sure that you're always offering the content scaffolds and the language supports as you implement talk, read, talk, write with your students. We're hoping you see the value in the talk, read, talk, write protocol. So let's look now at those interactive scaffolds. And the first thing I want to mention to you is that we know from research and from years of being language teachers that the greatest language use comes when we put kids in pairs and partners and dyads. But it's not enough to say to kids, turn and talk. I've been in way too many classrooms, and I'll pick on Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, where I'm observing instruction, and the teacher does something and it says, well, turn and talk to your partner, but it isn't really clear to the kids how it is that they're supposed to take turns and what it is that they're supposed to be saying to one another. And it's not necessarily fair who does the talking, who gets to talk, when they get to talk, and if the talk is evenly distributed. The minute I put them in triads, somebody could sit on their hands. And small group needs even more structure in order for all kids to participate. So now we're going to show you some interactive supports that we can use to make sure kids always know what it is that they're supposed to do. And they also have supports so they can do it. But in addition, we also create interaction when we have kids work with a mentor, when we have them work with us, when we have them work online or with a tablet, or when they do a computer-based interactive program. So we're going to feature the people-based interactions, but remember there are other types of interactions we can create for kids. And the major strategies for productive grouping and getting kids to interact are either cooperative learning techniques or total participation techniques. So there's a column on the Padlet that shares with you cooperative learning tactics and total participation techniques. And I want you to know there's a lot of overlap, because some of the things over here, like inside, outside circle, is also shared as a cooperative learning tactic. So there is some blending of these two strategies. But if you've not read a lot about cooperative learning, or you feel it would serve you well to learn a few more techniques, this is actually a very thick book, Kagan's Cooperative Learning Resource Book for Teachers. And I promise you there are hundreds and hundreds of cooperative learning techniques in there, all of which have names and labels. We're just showing you some. We're not even showing you everything on the screen. And the total participation techniques, this is a wonderful volume in its second edition. And I've given you links to these books if you would like to do more direct study of these techniques. But we will be sharing the ones that are bolded, okay? And we'll be showing you in the breakout how we would apply them and use them. But I know that a lot of you know about jigsaw, numbered heads together, or hold ups. And if not, you can read about it. And I've given you stuff already without spending anything on the Padlet. So one of the things that we want to do when we make these two kiddos partners is call this kid A and this kid B. They need to know who's A and who's B. This is a dyad structure. It's an A-B structure. And kids would know before I tell them, all right, turn and talk, they would prepare for the talking. And you see that this kid has a list of questions they're going to ask of that kid. And this kid also has a list that you can't see. She's ready to ask him questions. So first they prepare, then this kid asks that kid a question and this kid answers. Then B asks A a question and A answers, and they alternate. Or alternatively, they make a whole list of ideas, the type of destruction caused by hurricanes. And this kid shares one of his ideas with student B, and B then responds to the idea that was shared. Oh, I never thought of that. Oh, so you're saying, oh, I wrote that too. So whatever they're going to say back. And then this kid offers an idea to that kid, and this kid has to respond. Okay, so that is called A-B structure. And it's not nice if you do it, it's necessary to be done so that you have equal opportunities, equitable opportunities for speaking, and that the kids know what to do. They know what they're supposed to be saying to each other. It's very well structured. And so here's a way we could do that in groups, and it's called talking chips.
Kagan's Talking Chips is a recommended structure to be used for team building, practicing social and communication skills, to process information, or to build upon knowledge. In step 1, the teacher will ask a question or present a topic and allow some think time. In step 2, anyone can start by placing a chip in the center of the team table to share their thoughts. The third step, any teammate can share next by placing a chip in the center to add to the discussion. The conversation will continue until everybody at their table has used their chips. When all chips are used, you'll collect yours and begin again.
Okay, and so the way that we want it to be done is we want each student to take a turn. We don't want the student in the red shirt to put in all her chips while the others just sit and listen. We don't want her to say, oh, and I have another idea. Oh, and I have another idea, because then these three are not even getting a turn. We want it to be that you put in one chip and then you can't speak again till everybody's put in a chip. And we can help one another to make sure everybody has an idea. But this is why the think time is very important. We want all of the kids to have 4 things they're ready to share before they start putting their chips in the center. Okay, and so the think, pair, share, it's not a new idea. I know all of you are doing this, but I put it in the presentation because I want you to understand the essentialness of the think time. You need to give kids think time, and you need to tell them what you want them to do during the think time. And you want to set a timer, and you want to say, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, or I'm going to give you a minute. And I want you to write down at least 3 or 4 ideas, because you know that you're going to do the talking chips and they need 4 ideas. And then they spend time in silence writing or thinking about their own ideas. And they don't just jump to pairing. I think we're jumping too quickly to the pairing, and we're not spending enough time on the thinking. And so, let's do that delay, because it's super important. And then another thing that's optional in the Think, Pair, Share is the step of share. I'm sorry, the step of square, where, okay, I talk to my partner talks to me, we're sharing ideas back and forth. But now we've shared all our ideas, as has this group of partners, and then we can get together and share across the partner sets our ideas. And the way this is helpful is, suppose I have 32 kids in my class, which is possible. I would have 16 sets of partners. And if I want them all to share, that's going to take a long time. But if I put them in a square before we share, the best ideas will come out through this sharing again. Another benefit is everybody's talking again, so a double opportunity for speaking, and then a third opportunity for speaking, but now I only need eight groups to respond rather than 16. So I hope you can see the advantages, and I wanted to stress that so you think about it. The square is optional, but it could be very useful. Okay, so here's another one, the give one, get one.
Get one, give one. Today, you are going to answer a question with the help of others in your class. To start, take out a piece of paper. Draw a line down the middle. Label one side give one and the other get one. Next, your teacher will ask you a question that has many answers. When the teacher says start, list as many things you can that answer the question. When time is up, you should stand up, raise your hand, and pair up with another student in the room. Once in groups, give your partner one of your answers. Your partner will check his or her list and write down your answer. If they already had your answer written down, they will place a check mark next to it. Now your partner will give you one of their answers. If you don't have that answer, then write it down. If you already have that answer, then place a check mark next to it on your list. Thank your partner. Then put your hand up and find a new partner. Continue sharing and collecting answers until the teacher calls time. Give one, get one.
Okay, so one of the things I would want you to notice about Give One, Get One is how it lets the kids move about, and they really need that. They're stuck in their chairs too much, but it also lets them speak to other kids in the class, and you want it to be very egalitarian, and you want kids to have multiple opportunities to speak, not just one chance to say something to their partner and end of story. And as they move about in the whole classroom, they could have their ideas on whatever number of squares they could fill out, and then if someone offers a similar idea, they can just add their initials to the bottom. But when they get a new idea, they can add it and put the student's name or initials next to it who offered that idea. And this way, before kids would be speaking again about hurricanes or writing about hurricanes, they would have gathered many, many, many ideas. So the Give One, Get One is really helpful for making sure that kids are collecting all of the ideas that are possible to a question like, what kinds of damage can hurricanes cause? And another strategy that we wanted you to know about is the bounce card. And really what this paper that you can get through these links, this is 3 strips that you would cut out, and each student would only get 1 strip. This one exists for you, so you can make it exist in whatever language you would like. And here it's offering, let's say that when they were in that A-B structure, that A offered an idea to B, and B doesn't know what to say back. They're like, I don't know, what am I supposed to say? The bounce card lets them either bounce, sum it up, or inquire. Whatever their partner says, they can bounce an idea out off of it, like, oh, that reminds me of, or oh, I agree with you. They're just bouncing off of their partner's idea. Or they could sum it up. They could say, oh, so you're saying that, or so you think that, and they just repeat the idea. And here they could ask a question. Could you tell me more about why, how that damage happens? Have you ever seen it? So this gives them three ways that if they don't know what to say, it gives them an idea of what they could say. And kids need this type of support. Sometimes they truly, truly don't know what to say. So we need to help them with a bounce card. And so here's another way that we can get a lot of talking to happen. And this could either be done as a lineup, or it could be done as you're about to see it as an inside-outside circle.
So in inside outside circle, I take half the number of students from my class and make them form an inner circle, and half of them form an outer circle. And then I give them an activity to do with each other, and they work as partners. And then they move one step when I announce that you inner circle has to move one step to the right or one step to the left. And then they do the same activity again with the new partner who's standing in front of them. What I like about inside outside circle is that every student gets to work with each other. I mean, they cannot say, oh, I don't want to work with this particular student, because the pairing is very random and you never know when you move 3 steps who you're going to be facing. So students are forced to work with each other in a way, but in a fun environment. I think students like it because they get to move, and there's a lot of body movement involved there, and they get to work in open spaces, and it's not the traditional sitting down and doing activity.
Okay, and we'll show you later how you could do that as a lineup. So now we've looked at those interactive scaffolds. Let's look at the tools for supporting speaking and writing at the word, sentence, and paragraph level. And so this comes from Valentina Gonzalez. I always like to acknowledge her. And here's the link to a whole blog on this. And she shares with us 8 ways to scaffold writing. And I'm going to mention 6 of hers. But I want to suggest that these are not just useful for writing, they're also useful for speaking. So we're going to think of them for speaking or for writing, and how we might use them. And we'll be modeling this as we go along. So all of you already know about sentence frames and stems. We're going to talk about the use of mentor text. We're going to talk again about interactive word walls. We're going to model that for you in both of the breakout rooms. We're going to talk about modeling sentences for kids, how to make your sentence longer, and so forth. We're going to talk about drawing mentor sentences out of our text and how to use that to help kids advance their sentence complexity. That's the read like a writer. But in addition, we're going to show you word banks and boxes, thesauruses and glossaries, guided writing or guided discussion, brainstorming, which we just saw with the Give One, Get One, writer's notebook, and of course, all of you know about the power of writers' conferences. And so we won't say as much about that, but I wanted it on the slide because it's certainly a good way to support speaking and writing. In a conference, we're both speaking and we're looking at our writing and we're advancing our writing. Whether it's a small group writers' conference or it's an individual's writers' conference. So in thinking about word boxes and banks, I just wanted to mention there are different types of boxes and banks. And I want you to think about all the many things that might be in a box for the kids because they need it as a support. And so here are books in English. This one is about Pura Belpre, who was the first Puerto Rican New York City librarian and Spanish-speaking librarian. And here is a book about hurricanes. And so drawing from these 2 books, something I might have for my students if I'm in a Spanish bilingual program are some cognate word banks where the words in orange come from this story and the words in blue come from this story, but I'm just pointing out to them, you're going to find a word in this book in English, and we have a word that's very similar in Spanish, or likewise down here. And here's the case of pronunciation where in English, I have to say tropical, but in Spanish, I have to say tropical. Okay, so kids have to learn how to pronounce that word differently in both languages because it's the same exact word. Or maybe I'm going to model letter or character production. Maybe it's a difficult letter to write, or maybe, like, let's say in Russian, or maybe it's a difficult character to write in Chinese, or there's two that are very similar. I want to make sure kids are noticing the differences. So in the word box, I might have these two characters, making it clear to kids what each of these characters means and how to see the difference among them. In Spanish, I might show accent, how if I put the accent on the E in this word, it means this one. But if I put the accent on the A, it means is or are. And what about the upside down question mark? Maybe I need to remind my English speakers that they have to do that. Or maybe for the kids that are learning English as a second language, they're struggling with these horrible spellings in English with silent letters that have to be represented. So I might put down words that are hard to spell. Any of that could be in a word box. Or I might have words that I tell them, don't use these boring old words that we always use. Try to use some new words that mean the same thing. So I'm offering them, I'm trying to expand their word choice, and I give them a box. And I could have illustrations or not, depending whether I think they need illustrations. I can also give kids writers' tools. So one writer's tool I can offer if they're still thinking in Russian and they need the English word, I might give them a glossary to remind them of the English word, or vice versa. Maybe I'm going to give them a glossary in Russian and tell them what the English word is because they're still thinking in Russian, or maybe they just don't know the word yet in English. They've never needed it. And the other type of tool I can give that we always think of as a writer's tool, all of the writing experts tell us in a writing classroom, you must have a thesaurus because this is how we work on word choice. So it's so important that we have a thesaurus in the partner language and English, because we're working on both of those languages. And in some languages, it's not called a thesaurus, it's called a dictionary of synonyms and antonyms, okay? So these are the glossaries that we know and love that the Arburn has created for us. Thank you, NYU Arburn. And they have them in science, social studies, math, English language arts, in all of our languages, all of our partner languages. And this would help us if we know the word in Haitian Creole, but we don't know the word yet in English, we could look it up, or vice versa. But this is an example of a very supportive thesaurus, because when it tells me what bueno means, what the word bueno or buena means in Spanish, and then it shows it to me in a sentence, then it offers me three alternatives, but it tells me what each alternative means, and it shows me how to use the word in a sentence. So it has the keyword, the main word, and then it gives three alternatives, but I don't have to guess on the meaning. I can see which of them actually will be a good alternative for my meaning of bueno if I'm using bueno too much. Or if I'm using buscar too much, it will show me investigar and navegar, but it tells me which of these is appropriate for my purpose by giving me a definition and the use of the word in sentence, and in this case, even a visual. So this is a very supportive thesaurus, and I would love to have a thesaurus like this because it is the most supportive. But all too frequently, especially for middle school, it's more like this, where it just gives me the word bueno and then lots of alternatives, but I don't really know. If I never heard benevolo, or I don't know compasivo or bienhechor, maybe I don't know the meaning of that word. So now I have to go look it up to see which of these would be the appropriate replacement for my meaning of bueno. So just know that you're going to need a dictionary too if you have this type of thesaurus. It's great. It's given me a lot of alternatives, but if I don't know the specific meaning of each of those words, I need to look them up and see which one would be appropriate in my case. We all know about sentence supports, frames, and stems. So I'm not showing you this because I think you don't know about it. Just remember that stems are most supportive and frames are most supportive and stems just get you started, but you have to know the whole ending. But I wanted you to know that on the teacher toolkit, some examples for kids exist in English and Spanish, and we always want to have this type of support for kids, and we'll be modeling that for you in the breakout rooms. So now let's listen to the language lady. The video is a little bit jumpy. Don't be thrown off by that. It's not too bad. And she's going to talk about how she uses stems and frames. And she is an ex-middle school teacher. So sorry. So let's hear what she has to say.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Language Lady. I'm your host, Dr. Hemphill, and today I have some exciting news for you for your struggling writers. Have you had a struggling writer in your classroom say things like, I'm not sure how to start this sentence, or I've written this, but I'm not sure how to finish it. I know what I want to say, but I can't find the right words. Well, this perfect strategy of using sentence frames is a great tool to use with any students, not just ELLs, but any students that struggle with writing. Because oftentimes students have not had enough experience with writing different types of genres or using different styles of writing. And so they struggle when they have been faced with a task to write or answer a certain prompt. So sentence frames is literally almost like you could imagine a skeleton. You're providing the framework, you're providing the skeleton for the students, and then they can add their voice into it. There are some cons to this strategy is that some people may say that it's restrictive and it doesn't allow for creativity, and that's where you and your student can kind of think about ways you can alter the sentence frame. But let's look at some examples. And these examples will help meet the needs of all your language levels in your classroom.
So here is an example of a graphic organizer that utilizes sentence frames. If we look in the first box, it says poisonous, and then there's a line for words, so the student can draw a picture or list something that they perceive to be poisonous. In the second box, it says meaning, an adjective that describes something that's full of blank. Poison can cause blank or even death. So the student, although they have not written the entire meaning by themselves, they are still filling in the blanks with things that they understand to fit the description of being poisonous. And then on the last line, it says, what is something that is poisonous you should stay away from? I should stay away from blank because it is blank. So we have provided that frame of a sentence starter, but then they fill in the blanks with words that they have utilized, and they can use word banks to come up with other words. So if you have not seen my video on word banks, I'm going to post a link so that you can click on that if you have not seen it. An important facet of increasing oral language for ELLs and academic language is providing them opportunities to talk with their partners. However, at times ELLs and even other students that are native language speakers may not have the verbiage or the way to start the sentence. So here are various examples in different contexts of how they can utilize accountable talk.
Okay, and this, remember, is a stem. It just gets them started, and this is best used for transitioning and up.
Different subject areas. The next set of sentence frames are specifically for English language learners, and if you're going to notice that they're numbered 1 through 4, because number 1 is going to be for your non-English speakers, the ones who have just arrived. 2 are going to be for students who've had a little bit more experience with the language. 3 are intermediates, and 4 are going to be more advanced. So every single time that you see these different types of sentence frames, know that that's what those numbers indicate. So you can use this for all your English language learners. For the skill set of making predictions, here are perfect sentence frames that students can utilize.
And she goes on, so I've given you the link down there if you'd like to see more examples. But of course, the idea here is differentiating our language frames. It's not enough to have frames. They need to be well differentiated for the proficiency. And we don't want to keep using very basic ones. Once kids are at the upper grades and they've developed a lot of language, our frames have to be really sophisticated frames. So I want you to be thinking about that. How do I make my sentence frames at an appropriate level of complexity? One of the things we can also do with a well-selected text, narrative text, is to draw out whole paragraphs or taking out individual sentences so we can show kids, not tell them, how to construct more complex text. We would start by deconstructing the mentor sentence or the mentor paragraph. We would do that together. Oh, look how they used a time clause here to introduce the first phrase. Notice here's a prepositional phrase, here's a relative clause. We would be describing all of that to them. And sometimes we have to use the actual labels. Other times we can just say what the author did without giving it a label. And then we want to co-construct another example that's like the one we drew from the book. And finally, we want to give them opportunities for independent practice and feedback. So this is the famous I do, we do, you do, right? And that's the protocol we want to follow. One of the things that Valentina Gonzalez points out to us with this graphic is how important that we create the conditions for speaking that will help kids feel comfortable to speak. And number one of the conditions is to create a safe environment where everybody's going to be supportive. If I make a try, everybody's going to praise me for trying to get my ideas on the floor. I also want to model for kids what I'm looking for. That creates safety. They know what I'm looking for. I want to give them a scaffold like a frame or a stem or a think, pair, share where they get ready to have something to say. And I want to offer wait time. And then she goes on with a second graphic to explain why wait time is so powerful. And she says there's two wait times. The time between me asking a question and somebody answering, and a second wait time after the student answers, because I can wait for additional extended responses to come from other students or the student that I called on. Students need to listen to the question. They need to process what they've heard. Maybe they need to translate back and forth a little bit to make sure they're understanding the question. They need time to build up courage. Oh, I thought of something that I don't know if I want to speak. And so, and also they have to have that courage to raise their hand, get recognized, and so forth. So that's something that we want to think about. Ways that we can create safety is by helping kids get their ideas out and down on paper, or get ideas from others through a give one, get one, or get ideas from reading the text again, or scanning the text, or looking at the interactive word wall. I don't just start the speaking activity, I get them ready. And I always make sure that they're really going to be ready, and ready with the type of language I'm looking for. So one of the things we know about wait time is that even 3 seconds of wait time dramatically increases the number of students who will participate in the discussion. And if I've created that nice, warm, safe, supportive condition for speaking, then I want to notice who's participating, who's silent. Are kids just giving a personal response to the text and never using evidence from the text? Am I allowing for kids to just try out an idea, just some exploratory talk? That's good too. And do I follow up with them if I feel they have enough proficiency to elaborate? I don't want to ask a kid to elaborate who I don't think is ready for that. And I definitely want to notice who's communicating clearly and who's struggling to communicate, because it means I didn't set it up well. I didn't offer them enough word boxes. I didn't offer them enough models. I didn't give them enough sentence frames. They're struggling to get their idea out. And it also means I need to give a lot more speaking opportunities because they're not getting enough practice. So The problem is on my end, not theirs, but I want to be noticing when they're not able to communicate clearly and quickly. And then in terms of feedback, I wanted you to have a really wonderful article, so I placed it on the Padlet, of what we should say back when kids are correct, what we should say back when they're partially correct, what we should do if they're only expressing the idea in their home language and not the partner language, what we should do if they ask a question as a response, what we should say if they're confused or incorrect, and what if they say, I don't know, or they just stay silent, then what should we do? And so I refer you to this article because it's very useful and it's not long. But I also wanted to remind you that we want to, as kids are reading, have them jotting down ideas in a writer's notebook, words they want to use when speaking or writing, sentence patterns they want to try, transitions they want to try to use, and also self-talk, some things they want to remember to do or check on. And then if we're meeting with the student, we first want to focus on the writer's intention. First, we want to focus on their ideas. Oh, I love where you're headed with your piece of writing. And then after we really respond to the ideas and we draw out even more ideas from our writers, then we can focus on word choice, sentence patterns, sentence construction, overall organization, also maintaining their focus and not editing. Some kids think good writing is doing all your capitals and periods correct. That's editing, that's not writing. Writing is communication. Speaking is communication, writing is communication. It's not getting all your mechanics correct. We save the mechanics till the final stage when we're editing. Okay, and so don't get lost. Even you're noticing spelling errors, you're noticing it all. Just tuck it away for the future and focus on their ideas, their word choice, the sentence complexity and length, and so forth. And in terms of feedback, we have 4 types at our disposal. We can offer peer feedback, writing conferences as feedback, self-monitoring checklists, where kids are given a checklist and they put their writing to the test against the things they're supposed to look for and check on. And also they can look at my comments if I give them a response to something that they've written of the very next thing I'd like them to work on. So all of these are types of feedback that we should be offering. And we know that feedback is very, very instrumental in language growth. So we want there to be plentiful feedback, different types of feedback. We want to notice which type of feedback each learner does the most with. So maybe some kids really benefit from peer feedback and others shut down. Maybe some kids only want our feedback as the teacher. They don't trust the peer to give them good feedback. Some kids don't want to do self-monitoring either. So we need to notice what kind of feedback promotes the most growth in our students. So now let's think about why talk is important, why targeting the talk is important, and how we can support reading like a writer to advance writing skills. So remember that the next generation standards are asking us, the listening and speaking standards, and even the language standards are asking us to engage in grades 4 through 8 in plentiful discussion of our literature and our expository texts. This is where we want kids to be sharing experiences, thoughts, feelings, reactions, and connections. It's also how we expect them to process new ideas and to recall what they learned when they read. It's also to clarify and refine their thinking or to add information they didn't get, or to offer opportunities to plan and discuss and organize ideas before writing. So I want to go further with this idea and offer you the key strategies that we know support successful writing, the kind of talking that we're really after to make sure that we get maximum, that we make kids really ready for writing. And this is the type of beneficial talk that supports later writing. Idea explaining, where kids, before they haven't even picked up their pencil, they're sharing what they plan to write about. They're sharing their ideas and they're co-constructing a text maybe with one another. Oh yeah, let's put that in. Maybe they're getting some supplementary ideas, things that they weren't thinking to include, but now that they hear another kid say it, they're like, oh, you know what? I want to include that too. I forgot about that. They can rehearse what they're going to write before they write. And kids like that because once they commit to writing, some kids really don't want to change what's on the page. This is why computers are helpful. Kids are more willing to change what they've written on a computer than they are with handwriting. But if they rehearse before they write, that also helps them write a better first draft. The personal text rehearsal, where I just talk to myself. I just thinking to myself, talking to myself, writing down ideas. And then as I write, I can check on my text as I write, bit by bit by bit, and get some feedback from a partner or a small group or the teacher. And then finally, I perform at the end. I share a golden line, a passage, a page, or the entire piece. So this comes from Young and Ferguson. And you may want to be thinking about all of this as ways of using talk to support writing. Now, Nancy Motley, who is the author of Talk, Read, Talk, Write, cautions us that she started to realize it wasn't enough to tell kids to talk. She had to structure the talk. She had to target the talk. She had to tell them it should sound like this. Please use these words. I'm listening for. I want to hear these academic words and phrases that are up on your interactive word wall. Here's your stem. Here's your frame. She had to target the talk and model before she started the kids talking. And she also needed to make sure that kids were reading like writers. And so we want kids to notice interesting words when they read. This is what Michael Graves calls word consciousness. And they need a writer's notebook to write them down. They need to notice descriptive phrasing, adjectival and adverbial phrases and prepositional phrases that are fabulous. And they want to try to use them. To notice the length and complexity of the author's sentences. We can help them to do this by us pulling out a mentor sentence or a beautiful phrase or wonderful, interesting words. And in the breakout, we're going to show you how to do this. And we're going to show the kids how sentences begin, how the writer leads from one sentence to the next. And they don't do the boring first, then, next, finally. Okay, we want to stop that there. That's tired. We want to move on to other ways of switching between ideas. And we also want bilingual writers to notice when authors switch languages. Why is the author translanguaging? Why did they do that? Why did they call the grandfather Jeda and not grandfather? Why did they call the grandmother abuela and not grandmother? Okay, all of that we want them to notice. And we also want them to, the reason we're using illustrated books with lots of photographs, illustrations, and drawings is because they will serve us as speaking and writing prompts. So if I read this story about a Russian Jewish man who wanted to be a singer, an opera singer, and everyone recognized his talent when he was in Russia. And then he goes to the docks because his family saves up so he can go to Italy to study opera. And there's a mix up on the pier and he ends up in New York City. We always love books that end up in New York City. After I read the book, I can use all of these illustrations for kids to talk about the story events or to talk about Nathan, the main character of the story. So I want to be able to use the illustrations to talk about and describe in detail story events, settings, and characters, and we'll be modeling that for you. I also want them to appreciate the art. These beautiful, beautiful colors and scenes that were recognized with the Coretta Scott King Award for illustration in this Haitian book. This is really, really important for us to be sharing with kids, the different style of art that emanates out of Haiti. Why these colors? Why is the window drawn like this? All of this is super important, and we want kids to notice we want them to be building visual literacy and to noticing what these gorgeous illustrations add to the narrative. I also can use photographs if I'm reading a book about Pura Belpré leaving her home in Puerto Rico and moving to New York City. I can just in advance show kids a photograph about someone leaving home. And what would that be like to board this plane in the Caribbean somewhere, never knowing if you're ever going to get to return? What is that like? We can use the photograph to prompt a lot of speaking or writing. And then what about this scene of reuniting in the US at JFK? Who is this man? Is that the uncle, the father, the older brother? What is everyone feeling as they first make their first connection with their new home? And a lot of kids will be able to say and write a lot about these experiences because they've had them. Also, we can use drawings. And while this is from an old book from 1992, it was filled with wonderful ideas, and it would be hard to find, but it's great ideas. This is one where we ask kids to draw a picture of a house they used to live in Russia, and to write about their drawing, to tell us all about that house. And kids love to do that. Or here we might ask Chinese speakers to make a gift box for their family. What gift would they like to give their family? And then to write about it. If money were no object and they won the lottery, what would they give their family? Maybe they would give them a trip to China. Okay, so we want to use drawing to support writing and speaking as well. And we all know what descriptive language is. It is a description of a person, place, or event. It shows rather than tells. It uses all this type of language, very descriptive language. It uses figurative language like similes and metaphors. Word choice is super important. We're tapping into the five senses. So this graphic organizer is for you, but at the upper grades, you might also be able to use it with the students to point out to them that descriptive language gives us details about characters, settings, and story events. It shows rather than tells. It taps into our senses. It shows us, are people thinking in a clear way or in a vague or fuzzy way? What are they feeling? It also makes language choices. It uses adjectives, it uses adverbs, it uses vivid verbs, and all of the things that you see here, including changing languages from time to time. It describes the what, when, how, why, who's involved. And it also uses literary techniques such as personification, hyperbole, alliteration, etc. So we might build this word wall when we're using a wonderful culturally responsive sustaining narrative to show kids how to do this with their descriptive writing. And we would be building it as we teach each aspect of descriptive writing, and only including the things that we intend to show kids about descriptive writing, with their examples getting added to the interactive word wall. If I'm teaching adjectives, I can give them tools like lists of adjectives. Imagine 180 adjectives, way too many, but I could draw from a list like this, the ones that I don't see my kids using, positive and negative adjectives, ones that apply and ones that don't apply to Nathan, the opera singer. And then I want them to draw from a word box and start to use some other adjectives that I don't see them using. I can also model with this story about Vasya Kalinsky, the artist, the wonderful, wonderful, beautiful verbs that are used in this text. And I can show kids why these are creating vivid images in our brains when we read these particular verbs. Or I can have them go to a thesaurus and find, if they keep writing nice and good and kind, I could have them go to their thesaurus and find some other words. Please, please, please change your words and get out of those boring words. I send words on vacation. Deborah Short uses tombstones and puts words like nice and good and kind on the tombstones, but I find that too violent. So I send them on vacation. I said, that word's tired. Let's send it on vacation. Let's find some other words. I can also model how to build sentences that are more complex by sentence combining. Take these two sentences and put them in one when you're reading Grandma's Records. Start with a simple sentence at the top. Every year I packed a suitcase, and let's make it much more involved. Let's give a lot more detail and make the sentence very much longer and more complete by adding all of these phrases. Or let's take a mentor sentence from the book, Grandma's Records, and let's show all these beautiful descriptive words, here an adjective, there an adverb, and also changing languages and quotations. Let's use these mentor sentences to help our kids write more complex and interesting sentences. So now I've shown you supports for the word level, the sentence level, and at the discourse level, we'll be showing you more of this when we get in the breakouts, but right now I just wanted to mention, we can give tools of how to use different signal words than I typically use. So if I always use first, then next, maybe I need to start using initially and not long after that. So I can offer kids other alternatives. So let's take a look again before we go into the breakout at the talk, read, talk, write paradigm. And remember, this handout from session 1 showed us that the purpose of talk 1 is to engage with the content and set a purpose for reading. They have not yet read the book, so talk 1 has nothing to do with the book. It's just guiding them into the theme of the book. And Nancy Motley gives us 4 strategies. When we do the narrative text, we're going to model the ones in red. When we do the expository text, we're going to model the ones in black. Then we read, or we could view. Suppose I can't find a reading in Haitian Creole, but I can find a wonderful video. Good, I'll give them the information through a video. But always with the read or the view, I have kids pay attention to, so I made that in black and red, because we will show you pay attention to with both types of text. And then with the narrative text, we're going to show you annotation or taking notes. And with the expository text, we're going to show you highlighting plus. After we read, we make sure kids comprehend what they read by doing a second talk where they process the text or video and prepare for writing. With the narrative text, we're going to show you envelope please. With the expository text, we're going to show you check-in conversation. And then we have kids write. After we've done all of this, then we have them write to communicate their understanding. So for the narrative text, we're going to have them describe a character, scene, or setting. For the expository text, we're going to have them give a clear explanation. And we're only going to allude to make a claim with evidence. We're not going to hit this head on today, but I'm sure all of you could imagine what would be involved. Now, Nancy Motley gives us the talk, read, talk, write strategies, but we're going to add to this list the content scaffolds and the language supports. So we will show you, the red is the Nancy Motley strategies of the talk 1, read, talk 2, write. But to that, we're going to add the scaffolds, the content scaffolds of the sensory, graphic, and interactive scaffolds. And we will also show you language supports for each of her strategies. Okay, so we are truly bringing everything together, her strategies with our checklist. In addition, we've identified the next generation standards. So you're going to see it all. You're going to see us bring it all together, and we're going to do it in your language. So the first breakout room, we'll be doing the narrative text. It's going to be a picture book biography selected for your grade levels. When we send you to your breakout room, we're going to take a 5-minute break when you get there. If you're in the right room, you get the whole 5 minutes. What do you do if you're in the wrong room? You wanted to be in the Russian room, but instead you're in the Chinese room. Then you will click on a button that's down here in the corner that says leave room. You just click on the room, and then they will send you to the right room, and then you'll get a break. Okay, so it's going to happen like this. We're all going to get sent now to a breakout room. We hope it's the right one. If it's the right one, your facilitator is going to send you on a 5-minute break, and then she will start. If you're in the wrong room, you're going to click on leave room. You're going to get sent back to where we are right now, the main room, and they will resend you, but to the right room. And I'm hoping that if you speak Chinese, Haitian, Creole, Russian, or Spanish, you're going to take advantage of today and be in the partner language breakout so you can see this happen in the partner language. and only come to me in English if you don't know any of these languages and have to see it, talk, read, talk, write in English, which is your role because you are the ENL partner. You're only doing your work in English. Okay, so we're going to send you and give you a break when you get there, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so thank you, everyone. You can see that we have a lot that we're doing with you today, but I'm going to make a short bridge over to the expository text that we're all going to be looking at. And now we're going to be talking about graphic organizers, not illustrations from the book or photographs or drawing. And we're going to be thinking about the interactive word wall and graphic organizers to advance spoken and written language. And all of us are going to be talking about the topic of hurricane. Even though this is not important in Russia, in all of the other environments, hurricanes are common in China, in the China Sea, also in the Caribbean, also for Haitians and for Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Mexicans. The hurricanes are all happening, right? So that's why we chose this topic. But it's very important when we choose an expository topic that we organize learning around a rich unit of study, a rich theme that will allow us to bring in a lot of different types of texts. And so we chose hurricane, and hopefully it'll become evident why we picked that one. So I'm going to be sharing this interactive word wall that you see up here in a second, but I want to remind you that an interactive word wall is not something I make at home, laminate and bring into school and plop on the wall. I build it together as I teach the unit. So this part would only be up there when I'm teaching how hurricanes form. And then this part would only be up there when I teach about storm surges. And this part would only be up there when I teach about the categories of hurricanes according to the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale and the tools that measure hurricane wind strength. So I would keep adding to the word wall as I teach, one concept at a time. And the kids then, when I'm done, the whole unit, they've got it there for their speaking and their writing, to support their speaking and their writing. And they're going to remember it because they were involved in putting up these words. And it was getting built together with all of us working together. And here's another graphic from Valentina Gonzalez, where she's reminding us that there are many benefits to interactive word walls. First and foremost, they're visual. This I keep in my brain better than having to read all of these words. That takes longer. But to grab these images is quick, and we remember images better. It's graphically organized. I know where to look on here for each of the things that my teacher taught me. To the right, I find the formation. Down here, I find the surge, the storm surge information. Up here, I find the scale. It's clear to me where everything is on the chart. It's rich in vocabulary, and I'm going to show you later I could add even more. Right now, it just has words and a couple phrases, but I could add whole sentences. And it's student-centered because I'm building it with the students. So it's thematic, it's unit-based. The language and the concepts are there together, and it's going to support talking and writing when I'm done with the unit. So here is the interactive word wall as it would be built. I would start with information about hurricane formation. Actually, let me go back. I would start with all of the names we give hurricanes depending on the part of the word. So hurricane is used in North America and in the Caribbean, but typhoon is the word that's used in the Western Pacific Ocean, which means big wind, and it comes from Chinese. And cyclone is a Greek word for coil, and it's the term that is used in the Indian Ocean. So depending where my kids are from, they might know a different name for the same storm, hurricane. But hurricane is the same wherever it happens. And so here I would be showing how it forms, and we would be talking about the eye wall and the warm, moist air, and where the eye is in the storm and what the conditions are like in the eye and so forth. I would add more labels as I teach about that it only happens over tropical or warm water. Certain conditions have to exist. There's a rotation that happens in a counterclockwise fashion. Water evaporates and rises into the atmosphere. The wind churns it. It builds rain bands that come pouring down on us. And then I can also teach them about storm surges, add labels as I'm teaching about that, about the damage it causes to structures and the beach and land erosion, et cetera, et cetera. And I can talk about the type of storms and heavy rains and what produces that over the ocean. And then I can get into all of the different levels of destruction that happen and what each of these categories of storm means. Maybe some of my kids know better kilometer than miles per hour, so I have to kind of remind them about that. And also I could teach them instruments that measure wind speed, like the anemometer or a windsock for a very simple measurement. And so all of this would be built as I'm teaching the unit. This scaffolding is very, very useful. This type of scaffolding, a Venn diagram, a main idea web, a T-chart, it's going to support my later speaking, reading, and writing. And I start with a graphic. This is a very visual graphic, but I could have had a concept map graphic or an idea web graphic as my interactive word wall. And some of you, when you get to the breakout, may see something that looks more like that as your graphic organizer. But the idea is I want as many of them as possible because it's going to support the later speaking and writing. So here are some that I could use for hurricanes. They're just different types of organizers, all that have a main idea and all the details of everything that we need to know. And so here it's asking for characteristics and illustrations and how they affect people and how they affect land. They're each organized a different way. I'm making the choice. And I would ask them to use a graphic organizer while they read. One of the reasons we picked this theme is because the word hurricane that we use in the United States and the Caribbean is a Spanish word. It comes from a Mayan myth, a Mayan legend about the god Huracan. And there's a Taino word, a Spanish word, and an English word that are all related. And I could actually tell a little bit of this myth or this legend. And because I wanted you to have the myth or legend, I put it on the Padlet in English and in Spanish so that this just kind of gives an overview. It doesn't really tell the myth, but maybe I want to, in English language arts, maybe I want to read the whole myth. So this gives me an idea where I could go for that. And the book exists in Spanish and English, the one that I'm modeling here. And I would only use the other language version, whichever one I didn't use, to teach the unit for bridging. I would not introduce both books at once. I would not give kids a backup copy in the other language. I want them to access the topic in the language of instruction. And I also could use other books for maps and things like this that would give them information about how did these names come to be? Why do we call it different things in different parts of the world? What are the meanings of this? And it's another chance to learn to read visuals like maps and to think about the direction of the storms above and below the equator and so forth. But I want to connect all of my learners and their experiences with hurricanes. And of course, given that we're doing Russian today, poor Marina had to work with this topic, even though hurricanes are not common. But hey, now they're in the US, those Russian-speaking kids, and they will experience hurricanes. And so it's still worth some time. I can also use illustrations and photographs to prompt speaking and to target the talk. What is this showing me about a storm surge? What is this showing me about the destruction? What category storm do you think produced this? What's going on here? Why is there this cycling around? Describe what's happening in this picture with the hurricane that was taken a photograph from above it by hurricane hunters. And I can use my graphic organizers and my illustrations to organize ideas before speaking or writing. I can give kids a word bank. I can have them use the interactive word wall. I can give them a thesaurus. I can have them engage in peer discussions and get peer feedback. And many, many ideas are on the Padlet, on 13 simple strategies for helping second language writers throughout the writing process. So you will see ideas for speaking and writing in a column on the Padlet to give you even more ideas. But we will be modeling almost everything you see up here when you get to your breakout. Again, I want my word boxes and banks. Maybe I'm going to show word families, how I change a verb to a noun. So here we go. Or maybe I'm going to remind them of all the academic terms I want them to use. I'm targeting the talk. Or maybe I'm going to show them all the ways lovely English can spell the long E sound with IE, EE, EA. And so these are words that I might need, but they're each spelled differently for that long E sound. So maybe I want to show them some spelling thing in English. And certainly I want to give them stems and frames. They can be of any level of complexity. Remember the video we watched of the language lady. I do not want simple stems and simple frames. If I want to get complex language, I have to write my frame to generate complex language. So remember that. So now let's watch a bit of a video on verb variety just to get that idea out on the table. And my question for you in the chat is, would you use this video? It's made by a fellow teacher who was attending Central Michigan University for a master's degree. And he wanted to make a video for his kids to talk to them about promoting verb variety. And I believe he was a 4th grade teacher.
Whenever we write, it's important that we use verbs to let our audience know what actions are going on in the story. Without verbs, our stories could be pretty boring. But did you know that choosing certain verbs can make our writing much more exciting and entertaining? These types of verbs are known as strong verbs. Strong verbs are interesting words that take the place of those verbs that we use over and over again. Strong verbs are words that really describe what you want your reader to picture in their mind. Instead of using the verb ran, which is one that we often use over and over again in our stories, we can replace it with strong verbs like dashed, sprinted, or scampered.
Okay, and he continues, and he uses other ones like instead of squawk, screech, and so forth. So be thinking about that. We're going to be talking to you in the breakouts in just 1 second about verb variety. And I do want to let you know it's likely we're going to run over by a few minutes today, but we promise we won't let it exceed 8 to 10 minutes, okay? We will not keep you over the time by much. This is to show you all the precise verbs in this book and also to introduce it as phrases, verb phrases. And I would have this up on the wall because when kids write about hurricanes, they might need these phrases. Okay, you'll be able to look at this later with detail. I also want to show them how to make their sentences longer, how to combine 3 sentences into one, how to take a simple sentence and expand it using those clauses and prepositional phrases, or how to write a 33-word sentence by modeling with a 33-word sentence from the book where it's giving more and more and more detail. Okay, so I can model all of this. And I want you to know that we will be modeling, when you get to the breakout room, we'll be modeling how to use a writing guide and also writing frames. And Gloria found a great article that we've put on the Padlet under articles on speaking and writing, and it's all about different types of language frames that you can get to get whole passages out of your kids. Okay, so we're really trying to support you. So now we're going to go, I want you to find handout 2. We're going to go to the second breakout. Facilitators, we're going to try to be there for 27 minutes, not 30, okay? Okay, so I did promise you, and I'm going to live up to my promise, that we're just going to take 3 more minutes of your time. Thank you for being flexible today because we had that technological challenge earlier that kind of threw us off by a few minutes, but not bad at all. So we have shown you now for expository and for narrative text, we have shown you in all of our partner languages, whichever one you wanted to experience, how to do talk, read, talk, write for a narrative and an expository. But we've also shown you how to integrate all of the scaffolds and all of the language supports. So now you will have a hopefully really good understanding of how to blend all of this together and also address your standards. So hope you're feeling like it was very comprehensive what we got to show you about doing talk, read, talk, write in a dual language classroom. We showed you everything on on the content support and the language support. And so I also gave you this sheet as, I gave you this sheet as a handout. This is handout 3 with all of the word, phrase, sentence, and paragraph supports that you might use and that are listed on our checklist. And also now I want to show you what's on the Padlet, and then we'll be done for the day. So because some of you might be tinkering with your dual language program still, I wanted to mention one of the books that Ron told you about early on that I had the privilege to work on with Elsie Hamayan and Fred Genesee. It's a Heinemann book. It is not the only one. There are many, many wonderful books on dual language education, but I wanted you to know that we wrote the book to either help people implement for the first time a dual language program or revisit their program to make it stronger. So it's written for that purpose, and we are hopeful it'll be useful for that purpose. So I just wanted you to know why we wrote it. And then the Talk, Read, Talk, Write book is really worth having. It's a wonderful little book. It's not expensive, but I did put for you on the Padlet resource articles about Talk, Read, Talk, Write, about bridging and translanguaging, and other ideas for supporting speaking and writing. It's all on the Padlet, which will be up for at least a year, probably longer. Then we have columns for each of your language groups for Chinese, Haitian Creole, Russian, Spanish, and English. And we've posted specific resources for you, for your language group there. And finally, I wanted to include in this PowerPoint some additional speaking and writing ideas with pictures and photographs, because there's just so many ideas about how to use pictures and photographs. And specifically, I wanted to make sure that if you don't know about the picture word induction model, you would have somewhere to go, good old Valentina, and to learn about picture word induction models, something you can do with illustrations. But there are many other ideas here for you. There's just thousands of ideas how to use photographs and visuals and illustrations for speaking and writing activities. So thank you for staying with us a few extra minutes.